Have you ever wanted to play a game of slapjack with no potential for violence whatsoever? Perhaps you wanted to play a game of chess against yourself without yourself realizing. Or maybe you just wanted to grab the nearest katana that's closest to you and use it against your friend for grabbing the garden card that you desperately needed. Maybe that last one was just me, but nonetheless I do recommend checking out Samurai Gardener. It's a fun game. And of all places, I ended up running into it and finding it at an antique mall. And it's nice, clean art style, nice, kind of relaxing look to it all. Made me think it was a nice, relaxing, and calming game. I was wrong.
I can't turn it sideways.
It's not relaxing, or nice, or calming, but it's still a fantastic game, and I really enjoyed it, and so did the friend that I played it with. We had a blast, and we both agreed that we would like to play this some more to get better at it. And that's gonna kind of lead into something weird about this game. It's not a bad game, but it is slightly different. It causes you to think in a way that you don't usually think, and some of the restrictions on how you can place cards and stuff is a little weird, and some people may not like it. I don't like it, but I don't like it because it means I'm restricted. I do like it that it makes me think a little bit more strategically and in different ways. So don't discredit it yet. Listen to what I have to say about it and maybe see how the gameplay is, and then make the decision for yourself. But overall, I do recommend this game. It's fun. It's not for everyone though. I will go ahead and admit that. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and jump inside this review, and I'm going to show you what you get in the box, how to set up the game, how to play it, and finish off with my own personal opinions of it all beyond what I just already gave you. So let's get into it. Samurai Gardener, designed by Hitashi Hayashi and produced by Osprey Games, is a 2 to 5 player card game that takes roughly 20 minutes to play. The age group for this game is 10 years old and up. In the box, you will receive 1 rulebook, 1 scorecard, 5 player cubes, 5 reference cards, 20 feature cards, and 64 garden cards. The setup for this game is super quick, simple, and easy. Now it's not going to look exactly like this as I'm working with a very small space to show you guys, but you will get the general idea, and I'll try to show you the best as I can with what I'm limited to. And the first thing you're going to do is set aside the scorecard. Once the scorecard is set aside, each player is going to choose a player cube. There's 5 in total. I'm going to use the red and blue cube to signify 2 different players and place them on the 0 marker of the scoreboard. Next, what you're going to do is deal 4 feature cards to each player. Each person gets 1 garden card, 1 tatami card, 1 pond card, and 1 path card. And this is typically how they would be laid out for the player, or they'll lay them sideways, horizontally, all vertically, however they wish. Just typically you want it to be where you can easily flip them over when needed. But for now, we are going to just kind of leave them right here. The next thing I would recommend doing, though it's not required, is dealing each player a reference card for scoring rows and bonus points, as it's very handy to have during the game, but you can also just have one setting off to the side that everyone can reference. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your deck of garden cards and shuffle them all together. Once the garden cards are shuffled, deal 1 face-up to each player and place the remaining in a face-up deck next to the center of the table. That is the setup. Now for the gameplay. I removed a couple cards to give us a little bit more space to better show you how the gameplay works. First off, the objective of this game is to be the first to pass 25 points. It's pretty simple and it doesn't take too long to do. And this game happens within 3 phases: the seizing phase, the gardening phase, and then the scoring phase. First, we start off with the seizing phase, and the player who shuffled the deck is labeled as the starting player. The starting player will place cards face up in the center of the table equal to the amount of players. In this case, since it's a 2-player game, they will be placing 2 cards in the center of the table face up. Next, each player takes the time to look at the cards and see if they can use it for their gardens. After everyone is ready and has decided to choose the card that they want, everyone will place their hands palms down on their lap. And the starting player will call out I, and the other players will yell out O. Once O is yelled out, all players will rush to put their hands on the card they wish.
Oh, that works.
Now, if two players go for the same card, whoever's covering the most of the card gets that card. If the card you wanted is already taken, go ahead and grab another available open card. Once all cards have been taken, the game then proceeds to the gardening phase. During the gardening phase, each player will look at the card they just acquired and figure out how they wish to add it to their garden. Now there's a couple rules to keep in mind about adding a card to your garden. The first one and the biggest one is the card may not be placed sideways. It must be played vertical either this way or this way. As long as it is in a vertical orientation, it is fine to play. The second rule is you cannot break up any row. A row is anything that is made up of 3 tiles or more of the same thing, and the row can be made horizontally or vertically. A row cannot, however, be made diagonally. And there's 2 other rules for placements. The card can be placed next to a previously placed card, or it can be played to overlap another card. And you can overlap as much as the card as you want, as long as some of the previous card is showing and you are not overlapping any rows. So for example, I cannot play this card here even though I'm replacing a path with a path, because I'm interrupting this row. After consideration, the player decides to play their card here. After everyone has played their garden card, we now move into the scoring phase. The scoring phase is also pretty simple once you understand how the scoring works. In this case, this player has 5 path tiles in a row, creating a row of 5, scoring them 3 points. Different row lengths have different points. For example, if this player just played this card this round and wanted to score a path, they would score a path of 3 for 1 point. If they had a path of 4, it would be 2 points. And a path of 5 is 3 points. Be mindful, however, as rows with 6 or more tiles have 0 value. Back to the example, this player has a row of 5 and scores 3 points. To score this row of 5, first they must flip over their path feature card, signifying that they have scored this point. Next, they'll move their player cube to 5 on the scoreboard. Some other examples that you probably should know. Let's say the next player gets this card and has 2 more paths and places it right here, making a path of 4, and they wish to score it. During the scoring phase, they'll look at their feature cards and realize that their path card is already flipped over. Because it is flipped over, they are not allowed to score that feature. However, once all of their features have been scored and flipped over, they get to be immediately flipped over and you can continue scoring with those features. You're also not forced to score anything during the scoring phase. They still have their path feature card available, meaning they can score this. However, they want to build that to a row of 5, so they decide not to score the path yet. During their next seizing turn, let's say they grab this card here, and it has 1 more path on it. Then, for their gardening phase, they decide to play it on the end of there, getting a row of 5 for the path. They then decide to score the path of 5 during their scoring phase. Something to keep in mind, however, let's say that same player drew this card instead, and they want to make their pond a row of 3. So they place it there. Moving on to the scoring phase, they want to score 1 point for the pond and 2 points for their previously made row of 4 paths. However, that is not allowed. They are only allowed to score the pond row for 1 point, as the card they added did not add or affect this row at all. You're only allowed to score rows that were affected during that gardening phase. However, let me show you an example how to properly score 2 rows at the same time and gain bonus points. Let's say, for example, the player played this card here instead, and then they drew this card, where they have a path and a pond immediately next to each other. They will then decide to play this card here, finishing off this row of 5 path and a row of 3 pond. Moving on to the scoring phase, they flip over the pond feature and score 1 point for having a row of 3 pond. Next, they decide to flip over their path feature card and score the row of 5 paths for 3 points, moving them up to 4 on the scorecard. Because they scored 2 rows in the same scoring phase, they get an extra 2 bonus points to add to their score, moving them up to 6. They are allowed to do this because the card they played affected both this row and that row during the scoring phase. As stated before, this game ends when someone passes 25 on the scoreboard. However, just because you pass 25 first doesn't necessarily mean you win the game, since scoring happens at the same time. Let's say, for example, red player scores 1 point, putting him at 26 and ending the game. However, let's say blue player scores 4 points at the end of the scoring phase, also passing 25 that same round and putting them at 27, 1 point above red, winning the game. So, final thoughts on Samurai Gardener. I ultimately recommend the game. As you saw with the gameplay portion of it, and like on how to play, it can be a little weird. It's not too bad at first and seems pretty simple, but whenever you start getting a lot of cards on your garden and you start building up these rows, you start seeing things like, oh, I can place this path and make a 5-path row, but my feature card is not flipped over. Or I could have this double row, but I can't place it there because I can't turn the card sideways, or I can't place it there because there's a row there. It gets annoying and frustrating, but in a fun, good way, because it keeps your mind active and makes you think in a different way that you're not used to. And I can definitely understand how that might be. It might push some people away. However, they actually do have an alternate rules for younger audiences that's a little bit more simpler, and then people who might not like strategy might also like that alternate rule set. I'm not going to cover it in this because I do think that if you're going to play a game, generally the main game rules is what they're really kind of pushing for, and the alternate rules was honestly a little weird for me. But overall, I do recommend it. It's a pretty quick game, it's a pretty small game too, it doesn't take up a whole lot of space, and it's relatively inexpensive for what it is. I enjoyed it, my friend enjoyed it, we want to play it again. It's a nice game to kind of break out, and despite how I'm making it sound at times, it can be calming and it can be relaxing if you could decide just to kind of grab a card and place it where you think it would be best. Just for those who like intense strategy and cornering themselves and getting way too into it, there's times when it's definitely annoying, but it's annoying because you're more annoyed at yourself for messing yourself up in the future because you didn't. It's weird, but it's fun. I do recommend the game, but I understand if Samurai Gardener is not for everyone. So ultimately, yes, recommend. Is it for everyone? No, not necessarily. Anyways, my name is Braden, I'm That Field Engineer, and I really do hope that this review helped you answer whether or not this is a game for you and whether or not you want to put it or add it into your collection. And that's the whole point of these videos, so I hope it did just that. But with that being said, I'll see you next time. I have to do it all over again, I gotta do it again, because I can't remember what it was.